Long before Donald Trump ever descended that golden escalator in Trump Tower to announce his presidential campaign, he had already spent decades building something far more valuable than money, a brand that represented success, luxury, and the American dream itself. The journey from real estate developer to reality television star to President of the United States represents one of the most extraordinary transformations in American political history, a path that seemed impossible until it happened. Trump didn't follow the traditional route to political power through years of public service, legislative experience, or military leadership. Instead, he leveraged celebrity, business acumen, media savvy, and an instinctive understanding of American culture to achieve what no other person had ever accomplished, winning the presidency with zero prior experience in elected office or military command. This is the full story of how a businessman became the most powerful person in the world. The foundation of Trump's political rise was built decades earlier in the concrete and steel of New York City real estate. Born in Queens in 1946 to real estate developer Fred Trump, Donald learned the business from his father, who had built a successful operation focused on middle-class housing in Brooklyn and Queens. But Donald had bigger ambitions. In the 1970s and 1980s, he moved into Manhattan, taking on projects that others considered too risky or too expensive. He transformed the old Commodore Hotel into the Grand Hyatt, built Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, and rehabilitated the Wallman Rink in Central Park when the city government had failed to complete the project for years. These weren't just business deals, they were acts of public theater that established Trump as a winner, a builder who could get things done when others couldn't. Trump's business empire expanded beyond New York into casinos in Atlantic City, golf courses around the world, luxury hotels, and commercial properties that bore his name in gold letters. He licensed the Trump brand to buildings he didn't even own, understanding early that his name itself had value that could be monetized. The business journey wasn't without setbacks. Trump faced multiple corporate bankruptcies in the 1990s and early 2000s, restructuring debt and navigating complex financial challenges that would have destroyed lesser-known business people. But Trump possessed an unusual ability to survive business failures while maintaining his public image as a success. He understood that in American culture, perception often matters more than reality, and that coming back from defeat could be even more compelling than never failing at all. The transformation from businessman to cultural icon accelerated dramatically in 2004 when The Apprentice premiered on NBC. The reality show, which featured Trump evaluating contestants competing for a job in his organization, became a massive hit, drawing millions of viewers each week. Trump's catchphrase, "You're fired," entered the American lexicon, and the show presented him as the ultimate arbiter of business success and failure. For 14 seasons, Americans invited Trump into their living rooms, watching him play the role of decisive executive, tough boss, and business genius. The show rehabilitated his brand after the business difficulties of the 1990s and introduced him to Americans who had never stayed in a Trump hotel or visited a Trump property. It made him familiar, authoritative, and entertaining all at once, qualities that would prove invaluable in politics.
But Trump's path toward politics actually began much earlier than most people realize. He had flirted with presidential runs before, testing the waters in 2000 with the Reform Party and generating media speculation about possible campaigns in other cycles. He had cultivated relationships with politicians from both parties over the years, making donations, attending events, and building the kind of connections that successful New York developers need to navigate complex regulatory environments. Trump understood power, how it worked, who had it, and how to gain access to it. What changed in the 2010s was Trump's sense that the political moment had arrived for someone like him, an outsider who could speak to Americans frustrated with traditional politicians and eager for something completely different. The specific catalyst that many believe pushed Trump toward his 2016 campaign was the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner, where President Barack Obama mocked Trump over his promotion of birther conspiracy theories, questioning Obama's birthplace. Trump sat in the audience as Obama and comedian Seth Meyers delivered joke after joke at his expense, and observers later speculated that this public humiliation fueled Trump's determination to seek the presidency himself. Whether or not that single evening provided the motivation, Trump certainly spent the years between 2011 and 2015 building the groundwork for a campaign, speaking at conservative events, giving interviews about political issues, and maintaining a presence in political conversations through his active Twitter account, where he commented on everything from foreign policy to cultural controversies. When Trump announced his candidacy on June 16, 2015, the political establishment dismissed him as a publicity stunt, a celebrity dilettante who would fade once actual voting began. His announcement speech, in which he described Mexican immigrants as bringing drugs and crime, immediately generated controversy that pundits assumed would sink his campaign before it truly started. Instead, the opposite happened. Trump's willingness to say things that traditional politicians carefully avoided resonated with Republican primary voters, who felt that establishment candidates were too cautious, too calculating, and too concerned with media approval. Trump's business background became an asset rather than a liability. Voters saw him as someone who had succeeded in the real world, who understood how to create jobs and negotiate deals, and who couldn't be bought by special interests because he was funding much of his own campaign. The Republican primary campaign showcased Trump's revolutionary approach to political communication. He didn't rely on carefully crafted policy papers or traditional campaign infrastructure. Instead, he held massive rallies that generated intense media coverage, dominated cable news through controversial statements and Twitter posts, and attacked his opponents with nicknames and put-downs that stuck in voters' minds. Low-energy Jeb Bush, Little Marco Rubio, Lion Ted Cruz, these labels were crude but devastatingly effective, defining his opponents in ways that their own campaigns couldn't overcome. Trump understood that modern media craved conflict and novelty, and he provided both in abundance. While other candidates spent millions on television advertising, Trump generated billions in free media coverage simply by being interesting, controversial, and impossible to ignore.
Trump's business credentials played a central role in his campaign message. He argued that America needed a businessman in the White House, someone who understood negotiation, who could make deals, who knew how to manage large organizations, and who would approach governance with a CEO's mentality rather than a politician's caution. His book, The Art of the Deal, published in 1987, became campaign literature, evidence of his business philosophy and his ability to close deals. Trump promised to bring this business acumen to trade negotiations, arguing that America had been getting terrible deals from China, Mexico, and other countries because politicians didn't know how to negotiate. He would renegotiate NAFTA, he would bring manufacturing jobs back, he would make America competitive again by approaching international relations as business transactions, where America would finally win. The general election campaign against Hillary Clinton intensified Trump's outsider message. Clinton represented the ultimate political insider, former First Lady, former Senator, former Secretary of State, a person who had spent decades in the corridors of power. Trump positioned himself as the opposite, the businessman who had never held office, who owed nothing to special interests, who couldn't be controlled by the political establishment. His rallies grew larger and more intense, with supporters chanting "Drain the swamp" and "Lock her up," as Trump promised to disrupt Washington's cozy relationships and govern differently than any president before him. The campaign was chaotic, unconventional, and frequently shocking to political observers, but it maintained a clear message. Business success translates to national success, and America needed someone who had actually built things rather than just talked about building them. Trump's victory on November 8, 2016, stunned the political world. He had won despite being outspent, despite having a smaller campaign organization, despite facing opposition from many establishment Republicans, and despite polls that consistently showed Clinton ahead. He had flipped Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, states that hadn't voted Republican in presidential elections for decades, by speaking directly to working-class voters who felt left behind by globalization and cultural change. His business background had proven to be exactly what millions of Americans wanted. They believed that his success in real estate, branding, and entertainment demonstrated an ability to succeed in any arena, including the presidency. The billionaire from Manhattan had connected with factory workers in the Rust Belt, an improbable coalition that redrew America's electoral map. The transition from business to governance presented immediate challenges that revealed the differences between running a private company and running the federal government. In business, Trump had been the ultimate authority, making quick decisions, hiring and firing without lengthy processes, and operating with the flexibility that private enterprise allows. The presidency operates differently, with constitutional constraints, bureaucratic procedures, congressional oversight, and a permanent government workforce that can't simply be fired and replaced.
Trump's early presidency showed both the promise and friction of his business approach to governance. He signed executive orders rapidly, approached foreign leaders with a deal-maker's mentality, and filled his administration with fellow business people who shared his private sector perspective. Trump's cabinet reflected his business-first approach to governance. He appointed Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, as Secretary of State, arguing that a man who had negotiated deals around the world could handle international diplomacy. He chose Wilbur Ross, a billionaire investor, as Commerce Secretary, and Steven Mnuchin, a former Goldman Sachs banker, as Treasury Secretary. His initial Secretary of State nominee was successful businessman and later cabinet member. These appointments signaled Trump's belief that business expertise was more valuable than political experience, that understanding markets, incentives, and negotiations would serve America better than years of government service. Critics argued that governance requires different skills than business, but Trump supporters saw these appointments as proof that he was serious about bringing private sector efficiency to government.
The Trump presidency approached policy through a business lens that prioritized deregulation, tax cuts, and trade renegotiation. His signature legislative achievement, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, reduced corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%, arguing that lower taxes would spur business investment, job creation, and economic growth. Trump spoke about the legislation the way a CEO might discuss quarterly results, focusing on stock market gains and employment numbers as measures of success. He systematically reduced federal regulations across industries, arguing that excessive rules constrained business and prevented economic growth. His administration's approach to environmental regulations, financial oversight, and labor rules reflected a business philosophy that valued economic efficiency and freedom from government constraint. On trade, Trump brought his deal-making mentality directly to international negotiations. He withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership immediately upon taking office, arguing it was a bad deal for American workers. He renegotiated NAFTA, creating the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, that he claimed provided better terms for American businesses and workers. He imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, launching a trade conflict that he framed as necessary tough negotiation to correct decades of American disadvantage. Whether these policies succeeded economically remains debated, but they undeniably represented a businessman's approach to international relations, viewing trade agreements as deals to be negotiated, modified, or abandoned based on American advantage rather than abstract principles of free trade or international cooperation. Trump's communication style as president remained rooted in his business and entertainment background. He continued using Twitter as his primary communication tool, speaking directly to the public without traditional media filters, just as a CEO might address shareholders directly. His speeches and public statements avoided the measured language typical of politicians, instead using the superlatives and promotional language familiar from his business career. Everything was the greatest, the best, or like nobody's ever seen before. This style frustrated critics who found it unpresidential, but his supporters appreciated the directness and the rejection of political correctness that had characterized his business career. Trump governed publicly, making personnel decisions and policy announcements via Twitter, running the presidency with some of the spontaneity and personal control he had exercised over his business empire. The relationship between Trump's business interests and his presidency generated unprecedented ethical questions and legal scrutiny. Unlike previous presidents who had placed their assets in blind trusts, Trump retained ownership of his business empire while his sons managed day-to-day operations. Critics argued this created conflicts of interests when foreign governments or special interests could benefit Trump financially while he made policy decisions affecting them. The emoluments clauses of the Constitution, obscure provisions that had rarely been litigated, became the subject of multiple lawsuits. Trump's defenders argued that his business success was precisely why Americans had elected him, that attempting to completely separate him from his life's work was unrealistic, and that voters had understood this arrangement when they elected him. The tension between Trump's business identity and presidential duties persisted throughout his term. Trump's approach to presidential personnel reflected his business background in ways both effective and problematic. He valued loyalty intensely, just as he had in his private businesses, and removed officials who he felt weren't sufficiently supportive. His administration saw unprecedented turnover, with cabinet members, chiefs of staff, national security advisors, and other senior officials departing with remarkable frequency. In business, Trump had been known for hiring and firing rapidly, trusting his instincts about people and valuing personal chemistry over experience or credentials. This approach translated imperfectly to government, where institutional knowledge, Senate confirmation processes, and political alliances matter differently than in private enterprise. Yet Trump maintained that his business instincts about people served him well, and that removing ineffective officials quickly was better than the government's typical reluctance to make personnel changes.
The 2020 re-election campaign emphasized Trump's pre-pandemic economic record, pointing to low unemployment, stock market gains, and business confidence as evidence that his business approach to governance had succeeded. Trump argued that he had run the country like a successful business, creating prosperity through deregulation, tax cuts, and better trade deals.
The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted this narrative, presenting a crisis that couldn't be addressed through business deals or market incentives alone. Trump's response to the pandemic showed both his business instincts, pushing for rapid vaccine development through Operation Warp Speed, and the limitations of approaching public health governance purely as a business challenge. The pandemic became central to the 2020 election, and Trump's defeat by Joe Biden ended his first term in office, though not his political career or his influence over Republican politics. After leaving office in January 2021, Trump remained the most influential figure in Republican politics, demonstrating that his journey from business to politics had permanently transformed both him and the party. He retained massive popular support among Republican voters, continued holding rallies, endorsed candidates in primary elections with significant impact, and ultimately announced his 2024 campaign in November 2022. His post-presidency showed that the business brand he had spent decades building had merged completely with his political identity. Trump Properties remained branded with his name, but that name now carried political meaning as much as commercial meaning. The businessman had become inseparable from the political figure, creating something unprecedented in American life: a former president whose business empire, media presence, and political movement all reinforced each other in ways that blurred traditional boundaries between commerce and politics. The full story of Trump's journey from business to the White House reveals something profound about changes in American politics and culture. Trump proved that the traditional path to the presidency, years of political office, careful positioning, establishment endorsement, was no longer the only path or even necessarily the most effective one. He showed that business success, celebrity, media mastery, and cultural instincts could substitute for political experience, that voters might actually prefer someone who had never held office to someone who had spent a lifetime in government. His success reshaped how Americans think about presidential qualifications, what skills matter for governance, and whether political experience is an asset or a liability. Whether you view this transformation as positive or negative, as democratic disruption or dangerous populism, it undeniably represents a watershed in American political history that future candidates and parties will study and attempt to replicate or counter for generations. This documentary has traced the remarkable arc from Queens real estate to Trump Tower to The Apprentice to the White House, showing how each phase built upon the previous one, how business success translated into cultural influence, and how both became the foundation for political power. Understanding this journey helps us understand not just one man's career, but the broader forces reshaping American politics: the decline of traditional gatekeepers, the rise of media-driven politics, the appeal of outsider candidates, and the increasing overlap between entertainment, business, and governance. If this deep dive into Trump's transformation from business to president has given you new insights into how modern American politics actually works, if it's helped you understand the strategic thinking and cultural forces behind one of the most consequential political stories of our time, then please support this channel's mission to provide serious, in-depth political analysis. Hit the like button to help more viewers discover content that goes beyond surface-level coverage to explore the real mechanisms of political power. Subscribe so you never miss our next investigation into the personalities, strategies, and turning points that shape American democracy. Thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging seriously with these important stories, and we'll see you in the next documentary.